Karma. The idea of cause and effect. For some time we all try to base this work on self-evaluation instead of evaluation of the work itself. Trying to add the work on to what we already are, which is like building on sand. To use a metaphor from the Gospels. No one can add their work to what they are at present, because that would be starting from nothing real. The work can only start from what is genuine in us, therefore it obviously can't start from what belongs to false personality. No one can eventually take the work on the surface of themselves, on the side of personality, but at first this cannot be helped. When the meaning of this work penetrates deeper, we realize that we cannot take it as an accessory. The work is a radical thing that seeks to alter us fundamentally, within ourselves. Some eyes are more sincere, and some eyes are less sincere, with regard to any work on self. Most eyes hate it. A person can take hold of this work purely from personality, without seeing its deeper implications. They then regard it as an alternative to mainstream life, and see any concept of work as being against life, in fact, believing it to be in opposition to their ordinary day-to-day routine. They can then never understand that life becomes their teacher. Assuming that to be in the work they must somehow give up their daily life and go into a convent or monastery, where they shed all external attachments. This is not, however, the idea of the fourth way at all, which lies in life, and is applied in practice to oneself in the midst of life. Work infers nothing about giving up life, but speaks a great deal about changing your relationship to life, to your acquired personality, to yourself in life, and to others. Suppose that through self-observation we begin to notice that we have eyes in us, whose ambitions and motives we begin to dislike. Quite suddenly we arrive at a point of understanding of what this work is about, but that does not mean that we have had to give up on life. It simply means that we begin to approach life from a different viewpoint. We might in fact do everything better in life than we've done previously. We become more careful not only towards life but towards ourselves. Our karma, the outcomes, begin to change from that moment as we're changing our fate through the new choices that we're making. This work speaks very rarely of karma, quite simply because karma is the tangle of cause and effect that we lay down in ourselves through our choices and our actions. The idea of karma is introduced into the work in connection with the laws that we choose to fall under. The work says to begin with that we are under the law of accident, or the law of fate, the law of will, and so in consequence we live the life that we attract. However, it adds later that we also fall under the law of cause and effect, which comes between the law of accident and the law of fate. If a person could do what they do consciously, and without identifying, they would change the outcome and therefore their karma, which is the line of personal cause and effect in their life. They would then begin to fall under the law of their fate, which is a deeper cause and effect. By developing their essence, they might come to the point of changing their fate, beginning to come instead under the law of will. If we could will this work and all that it teaches, we would transcend the law of accident, the law of cause and effect, and the law of our fate. The law of our fate is determined by the quality of our essence. In essence lies stored up things we know nothing about, that belong to previous recurrence, previous cycles in the fabric of time. We know that if essence is changed, we do not experience the same life again. However, if essence remains the same, whatever personality we build up for ourselves in that life, we are destined to repeat the same cycle of experiences due to the level of our essence. We will attract the same life, more or less, and be subject to the same trials and tribulations, the same difficulties, the same generational trauma, and in fact, the same lifeline. The idea is quite simple to understand, as it means that whatever we are really, most fundamentally at our core, will always attract the same experiences because we will them into being without realizing what we're doing. The objective of this work is therefore to change essence itself to the point where real will lies. If we lack any power of self-observation, if we cannot see through our eyes, if we take ourselves for granted just as we are, then we will not change our essence. Suppose that we go along with the eyes of our false personality, muddling along with all the hopeless tangle of inner accounts that they make. If we have always longed for comfort, fame, wealth, or praise, then we will naturally have, as opposites corresponding to these four things, a horror of misery, obscurity, poverty, and blame. Let's take blame, for example, and its opposite praise, and ask yourself this question. Do you think that what is most real and genuine in us, that forms our essence, can possibly grow through the desire of praise and aggrandizement? Here lies an interesting side to self-observation, to observing just how much of our ordinary happiness depends upon being praised. Or again, take fame and its opposite obscurity. Have you noticed in yourself the eyes that wish for fame, all those eyes that wish to be better than other people, those eyes that wish to show off, and to appear vainglorious? They are amusing in and of themselves because we will never overcome them. There is a certain inner laughter about oneself that is extremely useful in this work. These eyes that invent our lives and maintain the narrative of ourselves are the same eyes that we have to try to observe, because they keep our life in a continual lie, a continual outer restlessness, a continual self-justifying based upon what a great person I am. P.D. Ouspensky would sometimes ask a student, well, is this true or untrue? Suddenly they'd realize that something was not true, and feel an extraordinary quietness within. Realizing what lying meant, what lying eyes were, how they were lying, and from this they'd gradually begin to realize that all restlessness is due to lies, due to falsity, and that they were more than this lying eye, something else that the work was trying to show them, something real, deep and genuine. All they were continually trying to do and say was pretending, maintaining some fiction they thought to be themselves. This is a moment of understanding what this work is all about. To begin to understand what all the teaching that relates false personality really means. To begin to see what imaginary I means. That there is something behind all that pseudo stuff that the work is trying to reach, to make us conscious of, which is no loss, but an enormous gain. Here lies the epiphany and has about it a taste that we can never forget. It then becomes possible to understand how most of our eyes tell lies, how by means of lies they try to fight with real life, and also with ourselves, wishing only to keep something going that is not who we are. A dream that is fed through reflection in others. How difficult all this is, and what struggles begin from this point of insight. Notice yourself talking away with others, full of righteous indignation, full of grievance. Then notice that the whole thing is lies. Try to come to the point of really seeing that your suffering is nothing but lies. Experience that extraordinary inner calm that results from seeing the truth about yourself. Because just as all lies make us restless, so does truth make us calm and feel at peace with ourselves. That is inner peace. Here we all are, marching into life surrounded by false and lying eyes, eyes that pretend, eyes that are full of invention about ourselves, deception and deceit. Then we meet other people in a similar situation, and expect to make contact with them or understand them, to actually help them, and perhaps even save their lives, which is clearly a case of the blind leading the blind. For this reason alone, it is necessary to see eyes in ourselves, and to see how they lie. Try something and go for a moment with one of those invented eyes and let that eye talk. Then in an instant all is an uproar within. Before you know where you are, you probably have identified with this eye, have said I to it, and it has you in its full power. You rise from your chair to go and see the person concerned, saying all that this eye wishes to say, perhaps all the while thinking you are behaving quite consciously. The work says that we must try to live more consciously, both toward ourselves and toward other people, and the way to begin to do so is to become conscious of our eyes, particularly those negative eyes. How wonderful it is to be in a state of consciousness in which we can see eyes wishing to behave in a certain way, or to say certain things. If the power of the work is such within, that we avoid them, and do not say what we could so easily have said mechanically. Although those eyes are thinking in us, we have the power of not going along with their thoughts, because we have other thoughts that are stronger coming from this work. How often are we able to do this for a short time, but afterward, when more asleep, these eyes that we refused the light of day, return suddenly and attack. Then we write a text or call, even go around and see that person, and the whole matter is as before. We have succeeded in adding to the chain of our karmic cause and effect. Because you have separated from these eyes for a short time, things may not be quite as bad, particularly if while they are discharging themselves, you experience a sense of dislike, a consciousness of them, even when you cannot control them. Here lies the whole point, that slight disbelief in them and a sense of distaste. That is the beginning of separation from them, and after a time, when we gather more experience in the work, we discover that we have to do many other things before we have paid forward enough through effort to escape from the power of such eyes that wish continually to keep our life down to one level, which is 192, or at best, level 96. We may find that we have to work on something quite different, for example our laziness, our lack of power of concentration, our lethargy in taking on new impressions. We may find that we have to make effort with regard to all manner of little things that we have thus far ignored. Find we have to learn something that we ought to have known, such as not to forget our umbrella or our car keys. The reason is that everything hangs together in our psychological makeup and its fabrications. Everything that widens us helps in the general work on ourselves. In the fourth way school, we are supposed to be able to understand all sides of life to some extent, to know something about everything, so as not to be ignorant. The work says that we must work against ignorance in all of its forms. All esoteric teaching suggests this. If we live in a few small parts of centers, then our basis is wrong. We are too narrow, and so work will become very difficult, a narrow, jealous matter, filled with envy. The work is supposed to broaden us in every sense, and to expand our view of life, or world view. The Greeks called this aret, the art of kingship, or good governance. Working from too narrow a basis is not likely to lead to result. P.D. Ouspensky said, "What is the good of you trying to study the special knowledge of this work when you have no ordinary knowledge that can be obtained from life?" At the time he was speaking about balanced individuals, as a first stage in aim, about someone whose centers all have at least some degree of development, attained through effort, emphasizing how in the fourth way, which lies in life, people must know about life itself, know everything that they can about what is going on, so they can take in impressions from the various sides of experience offered to each moment. He was talking about ignorance, about what a curse it is, and how impossible it remains for challenged people to ever meet with the fourth way. If they do encounter the path by accident, then it is impossible for them to understand what it is all about, what absurd things they make of it all. He spoke of an encounter with such an individual once who came into the work. They are quite ignorant, and so learn this work and think that they know something, but have nothing in them with which to compare it. They do not see that knowledge of this work is quite different from anything that can be learned from life, for they have never learnt anything from life. They have nothing to make contrast with, nothing to form a struggle against within themselves. Someone must be in life, and know about life, before they can see what this teaching is about, otherwise they will take it all for granted, as if it were ordinary life. That is always the difficulty with inexperienced individuals, and those that are set in their ways, who know nothing, and then come into the work. They hear about the work, before they have tried to learn about life, and that is the wrong order. Ouspensky was alluding to the work, how it must make a struggle within oneself, emphasizing how unless the work makes us struggle, it has no power to act on us. The work in that case simply becomes part of our false personality. Work in people that have already crystallized around something else certainly passes straight into false personality, whereas it should eventually create a struggle, ignite friction between yes and no. A person who has magnetic center to begin with, who can observe themselves, is capable of seeing how the work may lie in false personality. At first increasing their ambition and self-love, making them seek some kind of preeminence, because the quality of this work is quite different from the quality of anything belonging to false personality. If there is magnetic center, then after a time, some sort of separation begins to take place between false personality and those eyes that actually wish to work. When that happens, the work has begun to act on a person. And if they, by reason of many unknown actions in the past, have to a certain extent earned the possibility of inner change, then those eyes that lie gradually become more and more observable. The great process of inner separation and alchemy begins. Speaking generally, personality is rendered more passive, and the real essential side of us begins to develop, with all of its accompanying insights, mental and emotional perceptions. These gradually pass toward a realization of the influences of higher centers. But as long as we take ourselves as one, as a monism possessing cohesion and unity, then this is not possible.